Hi everybody. Today we are going to graph equations for quadratics in standard form. So remember from the last lesson we talked about standard form, and that's when we say ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so there's a, b, and c. Okay, so we're just going to, for the sake of these notes, we're going to graph x squared minus 6x plus 9. So the very first thing we need to do is we need to find a, b, and c. So on this equation, remember there is a 1 hiding right here before x squared. So a is 1, b is negative 6, and c is 9. So 1, negative 6, and 9. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to find the axis of symmetry. So remember last time we actually talked about what the equation for the axis of symmetry was, but we didn't actually do any of the work. But remember on these notes from last time, under axis of symmetry, the equation was negative b over 2a, and I said you're going to need that for later. Okay, well now is the time that is later. Okay, now is later. So remember the equation for the axis of symmetry is always going to be x equals, and we're going to say negative b over 2a. So we're going to say parentheses, negative, parentheses, over 2 parentheses. Okay? And we're going to say b is negative 6, so that's what's going to go inside there. And then a is 1. That's what's going to go inside there. So we say negative b, which is negative 6, over 2 times a, so 2 times 1. The next thing you do is you take out your handy dandy TI-84 Plus graphing calculator and you go ahead and type it into your calculator. So, how do we get a fraction again? That's alpha y equals, enter, and we're going to type exactly what we see. Now b was negative, but the equation said to do negative b. That means take the opposite of b. So we have to say negative, negative b on our calculator. Negative, negative b over 2 parentheses 1. So notice I typed it exactly how I wrote it. Push enter and we get a number which is 3. So that equals 3. So our equation for our axis of symmetry is x equals 3. Okay? That means that on my graph over here, I'm going to have that vertical line, and the middle of my graph is going to be at x equals 3. So that's my axis of symmetry. Okay, x equals 3. That's my axis of symmetry. Okay, what do I do with that? I'm going to take that number and I'm going to put it down here in the middle of my table. Okay, so we're going to make a table with that number. Okay, we're going to make a table with that number. So we're going to put 3 right here. And then you can actually make the table two different ways. If you notice, I already graphed my axis of symmetry. So that's going to be required when I ask you to graph this, okay? So let's go ahead and make the table for this. So just like yesterday, we type in this equation in y equals. So go to y equals, push clear out anything that's in there already, and you're going to type in x squared minus 6x plus 9. Okay? Type it in, and then go to the table. Now I want to know what it is at 3. So at 3 on my table it's 0. Okay? Now, if you notice, I've highlighted the middle of the table. This x equals 3, that's my equation for the axis of symmetry. It's also my vertex. Okay? And we'll talk about how to get that ordered pair without using a table in a minute. But for right now, let's go ahead and fill in the table. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 3 is in the middle because my axis of symmetry is in the middle of my graph. So I always want to put that axis of symmetry in the middle. And then I just copy the table from there. So for 2 it's 1, for 1 it's 4, 1 and 4. You notice a pattern in the table? Well, I do. Here is the middle. Vertex is in the middle, and do you see how I have corresponding points? 1, 4, 2, 1, 4, 1, 5, 4. You see how the 4s are the same, the 1s are the same? if you don't get this pattern, then you haven't found the middle. Okay, so always make sure that your graph is in the, or your vertex is in the middle. And now we're just going to graph those points. So 3, 0, and then 2, 1, and then 1, 4. And over here we're going to have 4, 1, and 5, 4. And that's your graph. Don't forget to draw your arrows because the graph doesn't just stop there. The table keeps going, so does your graph. And the last thing I want to write down for this part over here is that how did I get this table? I typed my equation into y equals. Okay? Type the equation into y equals, and that's going to get you your table. You could always get a table for any equation if you type the equation into y equals. Okay? You don't have to do any of the work. That's what's so great about this handy-dandy TI-84 Plus graphic calculator. Alright. The other thing is it asks you to find your vertex. So you can find that by looking at the table, or you can find the vertex by plugging it into the original equation. So if you know your axis of symmetry, then you take this number 3 and you plug it into the original equation for x. So everywhere you see x squared, everywhere you see x, you put 3. So you would put 3 here, and you would put 3 here, because my original equation was x squared minus 6x plus 9. So everywhere I saw x, I would replace it with a 3. And when you type that into your calculator, that gets you equals to 0. And so that means 3, 0 would be your vertex. Okay, so if your vertex doesn't happen, or your axis of symmetry isn't a whole number, then you have to use this equation to find the vertex. Okay, but if it is a whole number, then your table is going to be pretty simple and the easiest way to get that vertex. Alright, the last thing is I always plot the vertex point first. If you notice when I graphed it, I plotted the vertex point first, and I'm not using 6 and 7, so don't worry about those 2 steps. Okay? So that's everything about finding the axis of symmetry, all of that stuff. On your homework, it's going to ask you to use some of those vocabulary words off of that foldable that we did today. So, or yesterday. Not yesterday, the last class period that you were with me. So on your homework, it's going to ask you to find that vertex, which is that highest or lowest point, or that middle point. It's going to ask you to find your x-intercept, which is where it crosses the x-axis. And it's also going to ask you to do domain and range. So if you want, let's look at that right quick for domain and range on this problem. So if I were looking at the domain for this problem, remember, domain is all of the x values. So if I drew the sides of this graph, my domain is going to have an arrow on both sides. Okay? So the domain for this graph is all real numbers. Now, if I'm talking about the range for this graph, remember, that's the top and bottom of the graph. So that means I'm going to put lines on top and bottom, and I'm going to go, okay, well, the bottom doesn't have arrows, it has a dot, but the top has arrows. So that means it's going to continue going upward. So I know my graph is getting bigger. Remember, it's positive, it's getting bigger. So it's going to go up. So we're going to say y is greater than or equal to. And then where does it touch the y-axis at? 0. So for my domain and my range, that's how you get it. Okay? And you're going to have a couple of questions that ask you how to do all of that on your homework. All right, thanks for watching. Have a good day.